Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged.
All right, welcome back for yet another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. Here we are in Calabasas, California.
What's up?
Wait, Glenys.
Can I do some FAQs, aka facts, about our show just quickly? Because I'm kind of thinking that people don't know that we're in the same room. And I just want to say we're in the same room together, hanging out.
Okay.
And it's so much fun.
We're looking at each other right in the eye.
People always say like, oh, and Glenys, where are you? When we get guests on, where are you? I'm like, I'm in the room with Aaron. Like, we're here together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think that is something special about our show.
Maybe a future YouTube video of like behind the scenes.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow, that was a no.
Video is not my medium. I love podcasts, audio. But maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Bring up the video, didn't you?
Sorry.
Sorry, I like jumped in. I'm like, we're in the same room. I'm so excited to be in the same room with you.
All right. So, yes, I'm happy you're in the same room too.
Now that I've broken your rhythm,
go. Well, today's episode is amazing. We have Gloria Lucas on, who is the founder and creator of Nalgona Positivity Pride. This is a discussion that needs to happen in the eating disorder community, within the health at every size community. She brings a voice to a group of people who are usually not given a voice, whose stories we don't get to hear. And really, it's an embarrassment from my standpoint in our community that we don't have more voices like Gloria, and we need them because I think it's going to be an important part of how we move forward as a community to serve people in a much more compassionate way than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. She's just a really powerful speaker. I saw a couple of years ago at Beta. I guess it was a year and a bit ago. And she sort of talked about that dearth of appropriate treatment for marginalized people and people of color in the eating disorder world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, let me read her bio. Gloria Lucas is a body positive activist, punk feminist, entrepreneur, and public speaker. In 2014, Gloria started Nalgona Positivity Pride, a Chicana, brown, indigenous, body positive organization that focuses on the link between historical trauma and eating disorders, after personally struggling with an eating disorder herself. Gloria's work has been featured in the Huffington Post, Me Too, Bitch Magazine, The Body Is Not an Apology, and she lives in Compton, California with her boyfriend and their cats, Pepita and Mr. Orange. And just to give you a little brief rundown, she explains Nalgona Positivity Pride pretty well. So
yeah. Don't give any spoilers right now. Yeah.
But it was, I think it's a conversation, again, that I think everyone will really find very profound and hopefully will get a lot out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But before we get to that,
so
what do you want to share?
All
right, that was great. Moving on.
Aaron's like, you're taking way too long to get around to anything. I'm just, still seeing, I have spaces open in my private practice to see people right now, a couple. And I am starting to focus on seeing kids and their parents and teaching sort of division of responsibility and helping with family feeding dynamics. And that's something that I'm sort of getting into more now because it's a childhood feeding is like a real passion of mine. So I'm pretty excited to be opening up to that. And I also have my online program, Dare to Eat, always available now on my website for you to take. It is 5 weeks of skill building around sort of internally regulated eating skills. And I draw from a lot of resources, and I just teach all the skills that I sort of would teach you if we were working one-on-one. And I realized not everybody can work one-on-one. So I built this online course for people to take, and it's basically the price of a session, but you get 5 weeks of daily help. Yeah, I'm really proud of the course, and I think it's kind of fun too. And so check out I'll put the link in the show notes, but check it out. You can find more information about it at my website. How about you?
Doing a lot of the same stuff. Not a group yet, but soon.
Yeah.
Soon to be announced.
I'm excited to hear about future groups that you have, because I know you're awesome at groups.
Well, thank you. I'm a group stud.
Yeah,
I don't know what that means. Yeah, I'm regretting saying that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Still seeing people in my office here in Calabasas. I recently expanded, so I have a little bit bigger space, and also continuing my conversations with men on body image, and finally happy to be just about done with my body trust certification through Be Nourished. So that has just been a great 6-month journey to complete that certification. So yeah, plugging along.
Yeah. I've got a year planned of a lot of education, so I'm excited about that. So
for you or to teach people?
For me.
Okay.
Yeah, I just last year didn't have the time to do some training, but I'm working on my intuitive eating becoming a certified intuitive eating counselor, and I'm like, I need to get this done, but I work all the time right now. So so anyway, yeah, we're always expanding our brains.
Yeah. And if you want to work with either of us, check out the links in the show notes. We would welcome you to our practice.
We totally want to work with you.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, let's listen to our interview with Gloria Lucas from Nalgona Positivity Pride. All right. Gloria Lucas, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. We've been huge fans of your work for a long time, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. I listen to your podcast, and I actually share episodes on our Instagram page. So I'm really excited to be getting interviewed.
Yeah, no, listen, I when you do those stories and I sort of see you talk about it, so I'm like, we've made it.
I know. I was just like, oh my God, she's sharing our podcast. I feel very honored.
And by the way, your Instagram stories are priceless, and you got to give me a lesson on how to do it, because I think I've hit the age curve where I'm just like, what do I do? How do I do this? Like I look at this phone and I'm like, what do I do now? So good job on the stories.
Figure it out too. So don't even worry.
All right.
You'll have had to tell me how to do it. So no worries.
Okay. I'd love for you to share first how you came to this work, how you started Nalgona Positivity Pride, and sort of what is the mission of that organization and project, company, however you want to phrase it, and where do you see the need for NPP and the work you do?
So to explain Nalgona Positivity Pride at its most simplest form, it is a Chicana brown body positive organization that focuses on eating disorder awareness in an intersectional lens. And we provide support groups. We have 3 different support groups that are for people of color and for Indigenous peoples. We also are very active on social media, like we were just having a conversation about. And I also provide education, and I travel and I go to different community settings, and I present on usually the link between historical trauma, colonialism, and eating disorders. How I got into this line of work was because of my own personal struggle with eating disorders and not having representation and not having resources. And, not having resources is very common for any person struggling with an eating disorder due to it being heavily expensive and issues with insurance and just eating disorders being very privatized. So not having resources, again, it's very, very common. But I think that what made my experience distinct is the fact that, I didn't even have language to talk about my eating disorder with my family. Coming from a home where my folks speak mainly Spanish. Also, my friends didn't know what to do with me. And also, the most obvious is, not having any representation of people like myself who look like me, talk like me, similar background, address eating disorders as something that does exist within our own communities. So I'm heavily underrepresented in an already misunderstood struggle, right? Nalgona Positivity Pride was actually created out of an urgency to create a platform for people of color and indigenous descent people who have personally have been affected by eating disorder, self-hate, and also body image issues. When I started Nalgona Positivity Pride, I was actually still in recovery, and quite frankly, never did I have a clear vision of what it would be, because first of all, there aren't any models. There weren't any models for me to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just grew one step at a time from, hey, why don't I present on this topic? Because I think that people should know this. And then, hey, I think I have an idea for a t-shirt. Let's make a t-shirt. And hey, why don't we create this support group? So that's kind of how it grew, not having a clear vision of what it would be, right? And sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing. So, and that's really the reality of a lot of people of color, right? We just have had to create our own opportunities and figure it out along the way.
Yeah. So I was born, my dad's from Mexico. And I was born in Mexico. My mom is from LA. And so when I told him about this, your platform, he laughed out loud at the name, of course. So, would you mind telling us what Nalgona means?
Of course. So Nalgona means a woman with a big butt in Spanish. So literally is big booty pride.
Yep.
Essentially what it means, and how that term came to be was actually from a friend of mine, Darby, whom I used to work with and identifies as a live drag person, meaning he wears drag every day, like mainly every day to work, right? So they're definitely like very a gender rebel, right? And they said once, oh, it's because we are Nalgona positive. And it made me giggle. And I thought that is such a cute term.
Yeah.
Whatever it is I'm making, that's going to be the name of it, right? And so that's how it came to be. And quite frankly, I feel that I never knew MPP would blow up, right? I never thought it would be what it is today, but it was definitely embarrassing the first year or so, telling people what it was called. Yeah.
but so the other thing that I love about the word is, to me, it's not just like a big butt, but it's like you're also a badass. Like you sort of carry that big butt with some pride, right? I mean, I don't know if that's just me reading into it or just how I've understood the word. But I also sort of see it as like, Nalgona is like, sort of
taking up space,
right? Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people might also misunderstand it when they first hear about me. They literally think that it's just like a big booty page, although I hardly ever post anything about booties, right?
Right.
But yeah, and it's no way to continue the hypersexualization of women's body parts, right? But yeah, I think it could be whatever people want it to be, because it has been a term of endearment, and it also has been a term of shame, right?
Yeah.
Like, or you're getting too fat, like you have butt, or it's equating to space, right? Like how much space a brown woman's body takes up. So it could be whatever people want it to be.
Yeah. So a follow-up question to sort of your journey then a little bit, if it's okay, is and full disclosure, I work part-time in an eating disorder treatment center. And, so I work in this world that is, part of the problem in some sense, right? That we don't have adequate representation of our, in our treatment centers still to this day. How did you find the resources, or what resources really were useful for you as you started to work on your own recovery?
So in my journey, the first few years I had nothing, right? I didn't have health insurance. I didn't even have Medi-Cal or any of that. So it was just something that I had and I had to figure out how to eventually, try to heal from that. And eventually when I got health insurance, there was a program, but I couldn't do it because of the hours that the office was open, right? And I had a very hectic schedule that changed all the time, right? So for me, initially, my recovery was something I had to do by myself, which is not something I recommend at all because it's dangerous. But that has been the experience of a lot of us, is that we have had to figure out our own ways of healing. And for me, that was, first of all, reading. And making the connection, because my journey and what I wanted to know was, why did I develop this?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that knowing that would give me a bigger understanding of the core issues, right? And ultimately what helped me heal was creating Nalgona Positivity Pride, because that was my medicine and continues to be my medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned the speaking part too. And I just want to sort of say, like, we need to give you like a megaphone, right? Because you're doing probably the most brave thing on some level, because, you're right. You're like you said, like without any sort of clinical training or whatever, you're speaking about the issues that we really need to hear about, because it's your lived experience, and the lived experiences that you share in your talks is, powerful. And I think hearing the voices of those that are marginalized, to me, is like, has been changing in my work. So if I can give you a bigger megaphone to share, I think I will make one and continue to do that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So the question, going back to my dad, right? He saw my poster that I have of yours. It's actually in our office right now. We're looking at it. And you can buy it on Etsy, on your Etsy store. But it says, "You're entering a body positive zone." And then, it says, "Please refrain from the following," and you list a few things. He, and anyone who sort of sees it usually understands most of them, except health or concern trolling, right? Keep your health advice to yourself. Can you explain sort of to our listeners, and maybe even to my dad, who listens sometimes, what is health trolling? What's concern trolling?
So usually a health and concern trolling or troll is the way people mask their fat phobia with a health concern, such as, I'm only telling you this because I care about you and because I love you, right? Like, well, you need to lose some weight, you're getting too big, or, those things, right?
Yeah.
And we live in a time where health is moralized, and it's seen as an individualistic goal, that if you could just try harder, you can accomplish this appearance of health, right? But this is a very ableist and ignorant belief, because health disparities, disease, and disability has always existed and will always exist, right? So people don't put into consideration how health disparities, white supremacy, poverty, historical trauma, environmental racism, and all these other forms of oppression are real factors that hinder people's overall well-being.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, oh, if you eat organic foods and you go get a gym membership, then you can accomplish this very performative way of viewing health, right? I mean, these systems of oppression are actually more harmful, right, than just telling people go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And also the way people understand health is heavily embedded in capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buying organic kale and going to this vegan restaurant and going to this very particular gym, right? It's all very, very embedded in capitalism.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, like sharing your concern with somebody um, about their weight or about their health does nothing for the individual because, and I tell people, don't you think that this person already knows they're gaining weight? Or don't you think they know what it's like to be in their body? Like they know, we know what it is to be in our bodies and when we're not feeling well and when we are. Um, so really this whole concern sharing does nothing but create fat phobia and shame. It doesn't solve anything because if that were the case then all of us would be smaller. Okay,
Yeah.
we all would be smaller. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what it means. It's a loved one, quote unquote, sharing how, quote unquote, they're concerned about your health because of your weight or
Yeah.
what you're eating, and so forth.
It almost sounds like one of those things where someone like the formula is like, if it starts with, I'm just saying this because I love you, ... or I know I shouldn't be talking to you about this, but like, I think that's that's a really good sign. You're probably down a concern trolling or health trolling avenue that you might want to back up from.
Right. And my thing is like, if you're really concerned about people's health, then go fight Monsanto. Okay? Go fight environmental racism. Go fight racism, right? Because these are real issues that are impacting low income and marginalized communities, right? Like go fight that, or think about the way white supremacy is really what's killing us,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that I get a lot of health trolls in my page. Ugh, it's just annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gross. Gloria, you first came onto my radar in at the end of 2016 at the Beta conference, and I went to your talk on that sort of centered on historical trauma. And I didn't really know. I went in like not knowing what that was, and it was such a great talk. And so I wonder if you can sort of tell us a little bit about like what historical trauma means and sort of how it relates to colonialism and how that affects us in terms of like eating disorders and how we live and illness.
Yeah. So historical trauma within the Native American population is something that Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart has studied and explains it as massive, complex, and cumulative group trauma that has been caused by colonialism. So when Europeans stepped foot on what is considered today America, they did so with interest of land acquisition, Christianity, and wealth. And in doing so, Europeans dehumanized native peoples, destroyed land and natural resources. They spread European disease to the point that 75 to 90% of all native deaths are a result of European disease. Displaced many indigenous peoples, raped and mutilated and killed brown people, enslaved Africans and natives, violently converted natives into Christianity, and then also colonialism drastically changed food and medicine. So ultimately, colonialism, right, is a system of domination that is extremely violent and killed culture, right? And as a result, it also changed family, gender, culture, tradition, and food And these legacies continue to this day, right? So some of the signs of historical trauma include depression, anger, identification with the dead, reenacting affliction within one's own life, and self-harm, right? So ultimately, eating disorders are a sign of grief, right? And are linked to historical trauma and colonialism, because if you think about it, even diet culture is colonial mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a diet culture before, right? It was just native people had a very strong relationship with land and food. They were very present with food. There was no shaming of food, because when Europeans came here, they shamed indigenous foods. For instance, Europeans wouldn't eat guinea pig because they believed if they ate guinea pig, then they would turn Indian, right? So then this is where the whole ideology of good foods and bad foods stem from, right? The idea of you are what you eat is also stemming from colonialism and European culture, because they believe that food shaped the colonial body, right? And in return, a lot of indigenous descent people have internalized those ideas about good foods, bad foods, and ultimately has created like this very complex portrayal of native foods. Like, for instance, all these native foods all of a sudden have become the new hyped up food. Like, for instance, right now, cactus, nopales are in. Yeah, this was a food that we were shamed for heavily for eating, right? So it just feels that whenever the mainstream white world is ready to capitalize on food, then they flip this image of this food and increase prices, and now make it not accessible for the original people who ate that food. Does that make sense? Right. So it's a very complex thing, right? How colonialism and historical trauma continue to violently impact our own relationship with food and in our bodies.
The other example of a food that sort of fits that might be like quinoa, right?
Right.
Where, I don't know the historical, how colonialism might have perception of that food, but 10 years ago, 5 years ago, like it becomes the super grain to eat, right? And then you hear about indigenous folks not being able to afford the grain anymore, and they're the ones growing it, but it's going to the United States, where orthorexic folks are just buying it up by the bulk load.
Chia seeds, for
Yeah.
instance. But yeah. By all means, and I mean, there's tons of examples of food of these foods that we originally ate, were shamed for it, and now it becomes this new hipster fad, right?
Yeah.
Very disrespectful.
Yeah. And so, as you sort of, and I know that like we're asking you a question that you probably give hour-long presentations on, and we're asking you to talk about it in, a 5 or 10 minute bit. But you talked about this link to eating disorders, how eating disorders, are can manifest as a result of this. I'm wondering if you could just sort of expand on that little part a little bit, because, I think the thing that is so harmful is that people assume incorrectly that that eating disorders fit within one narrative, when obviously they don't. You're highlighting how it doesn't, but I'm wondering if you could just expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that eating disorders are a product, again, I said, about colonialism, but also historical trauma. And I feel that, for instance, eating disorders is a way to do self-harm, right? Which is a sign of historical trauma. But also, additionally, like we all know that if a family member has an eating disorder, then one is 7 to 12 times more likely to develop an eating disorder. And so what we do know is that there's many accounts of indigenous peoples not having access to food, right? Poverty is something that's that highly impacted and continues to impact people in reservations and other indigenous territories in this continent, right? We also see how many indigenous peoples committed slow suicide by starving, right? Due to the horrendous conditions they were forced to live in, right? And a lot of them, like for instance, Bolivian Indian miners would with the few coins they would not buy food. They would buy coca leaves as a way to not eat and manipulate hunger cues, as well as purchase aguardiente, right, to burn their guts as a means of slow suicide. So if there's accounts of food insecurity, if there's accounts of manipulating hunger cues, of poverty and so forth, then it only makes sense as to why people with indigenous descent today are also struggling with eating disorders. Now, whether or not this is something that's researched or put on published or put out there, like that's a whole nother thing, right? But I do know of many people with indigenous descent that have eating disorders, right? So it only makes sense.
Yeah.
It only makes sense.
Yeah, the what you're alluding to is like, maybe we'll have you on for part 2. It's like the whole discussion of, what the whole is. We have, white men asking the questions and creating evidence-based, quote unquote, evidence-based results when we're actually asking all the wrong questions, So.
Right. And I mean, my question too, and this is something that I brought up recently in the eating disorder conference, is that indigenous people have a lot of trauma with research.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the question that we need to ask is then, are we doing more harm than good with this research?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel too that the idea that the only way someone's experiences are validated is through research, then it takes away people's humanity.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I'm something that I'm currently really thinking about, right? Like how can we highlight these, a marginalized group, their stories and our stories in a way that is just validated just because.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than thinking about it in a very linear way. We're like, well, we need research and we need these numbers and, we need to do all of this. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it does more harm than good. And I just feel, can we just validate these experiences just because? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. My next question is, what I see so much of your work in helping do is bring a voice to those who are being left out. And I'm wondering how in your work with NPP or in your community, how you see, body image, eating disorders affecting men. Do you see that discussion happening at all from where you sit?
No, not at all. I don't see cisgendered men, right, having these discussions with food and body image. And my own personal experience with dating cisgendered men is that men only talk about these things with feminine, intimate people in their lives. And to me, I just feel that men need to understand that it's not that they need to start having this discussion amongst themselves, amongst other men, right? Yeah. And because as it is, like, women already have enough emotional labor as it is for men, and it sometimes feels that, when it comes to talking about body image and the relationship with food, it ends up being a woman who filters out all their emotions, right? And again, I just feel that men need to start having their own discussions amongst themselves, because we are trying to do this, right? So why can't men? And obviously we know why, but I feel that it needs to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, as a man, as a cisgendered man, I would agree. And, you know, I've done a few of these sort of conversations with men around their body image, and they all say, like, I've never had this conversation before. I've never, and never talked about it with anyone. And it is truly sad because we struggle, right? And we have these issues, and just know where to let it out, you know, or to feel safe to let it out amongst other men.
Right. I highly encourage men to do their own healing and talking circles.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, but again, this is not rocket science. You know, like, I'm sorry, but I'm just very real when it comes to dealing with men's issues, is that this is not rocket science. Go and do it.
Yeah,
do it.
absolutely.
Because women are doing this already. Trans people are doing this already. Genderqueer people are doing this already. Just hop on the train and do it yourself, like, with other men. Because as a woman who has men in my life, like, we're tired. We're so tired of doing all the emotional labor for y'all, and I don't want to do it anymore. So you go out there, make some friends, and talk about it. You know, and I mean, that's where you start.
Yeah,
creating that language for it.
Well, maybe this podcast is going to inspire someone, right? Because if you did it for your own part of your own recovery, right? Maybe someone is going to hear this and say, like, yeah, I'm fucking starting something. And hopefully we inspire that.
Yeah, do it. And I mean, our Sage and Spoon, which is an online peer support group that we have, is open to people of all gender identities. Yet, each time I have participated, I don't think I've ever seen or heard a cis man in the group.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done, but don't expect women to do it.
Yeah.
It's our work. It's our work. You're right.
Yeah. Gloria, can you tell us a little bit about Sage and Spoon?
Yes. So this is a twice a month online peer support group for people of color and for Indigenous peoples who have an eating problem. It's free, and we hold it via Zoom. So if people email us at nppmeetings@gmail.com, we add them to our listserv and email them how to log in to our meetings. And people can stay anonymous. They could call in the phone. They could opt out of the video if they choose to. And again, it's twice a month. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it's the only support group that is designated for people of color and Indigenous people. So I feel like take advantage of it, right? It's a great resource to have. Personally, myself, the reason why this group was created was because all the support groups, right? I was a member of Overeaters Anonymous. And I always was the youngest and the only person of color in the room. And I've heard the same about many other support groups. So I feel that how we start healing is through connecting. And if you can't connect with people, then how are you going to heal? So this is why this group was created.
Awesome. And it runs, you do it every 2 weeks.
It's every first Saturday of the month at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and every last Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Awesome. So we'll put a link to NPP in our show notes, and we'll put a link to Sage and Spoon also, so people can learn more and sign up.
Yeah, we also have a women's circle here in Los Angeles called Te Con Miel, and this women's circle focuses on body image, and this is held once a month as well.
Great. Awesome. Well, Gloria, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day and talking with us. And I think, what you're talking about is really important for us to hear. And I think it's part of where like this Haze social justice movement is moving towards. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience and adding your voice to our community. It's really needed. And I'm thankful we could talk to you today.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. This has been another Dietitians Unplugged production. You can find Aaron at bvmrd.com, and you can find Glenys at daretonotdiet.com.